Let me start then with Berend Lehmann.
Yeah.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, this is a book project, and this is only one title we are considering. I'll give you a couple of alternatives. This would be a sort of a quotation from a letter of Tsar Peter I, who complained about Berend Lehmann in a certain connection and said, why doesn't this man keep to his merchantry and money lending? Why does he meddle in the business of the great lords? And that is seemed to be a possible title. Something very, well, very sober and not very telling would be just according to Berend Lehmann, a biography. Another alternative, extending Jewish limits. Listen to what I'm telling you, and afterwards we can perhaps discuss the alternatives. I hope you don't mind my standing, but I'm just not used to sitting behind the laptop.
But perhaps to drive home this point, I mean, the title is still under discussion. Yeah. So Berndt Strobach is still looking for a title that really reflects, the personality of Berend Lehmann.
My hometown of Halberstadt. The postcard picture is a little dated, but for a simple reason. Just beside the grand cathedral, the high roof of the cathedral, of the synagogue. So must have been taken before 1938, when the interior was wrecked. The synagogue was not burned because then a whole part of the town would have gone down as well. But the Jewish community was forced to take the building down, and this is a building where carpenters are on the roof, starting to take the whole thing off at the cost of the community because of decay. There was no decay at all, but it was just the way they did it, as they hadn't had a chance of burning it. Watching 3 Christian churches, the Cathedral, St. Martin's, Our Lady's. This synagogue was once a beautiful Baroque building, and I took it for the beginning because Berend Lehmann, the hero of my book project, was the sponsor of it. He paid for most of it between 1709 and 1712. So there is one connection with Berend Lehmann and the happenings of the 30s, the dark and bloody happenings of the 30s. This issue of Der Stürmer, terrible Nazi periodical, a few days after Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, on the front page has an advertisement for Hofjuden, ein neues Stürmerbuch. You see how important and how important the Hofjuden were to the Nazis. In connection with Kristallnacht, this book appeared by a man called Peter Deeg, about whom I am writing in one of the chapters of my book. So this is just to show you how closely these things are connected. Yeah, of course I was not big enough to be present at these terrible happenings. I was 5 years old then, and during my Nazi childhood and my socialist school time, there was no mention of Jews in Halberstadt. How then did I come to write about it and to investigate these things? A few years after the fall of the wall, when strolling along the streets of Halberstadt, glad to see that buildings in the lower city that had been spared the bombs of World War II and survived neglect in the German Democratic Republic were beginning to be refurbished. And then I discovered this fine red brick building, and by pure chance witnessed a talk given in it about Berend Lehmann. I learned that the building was the Yeshiva, the Torah and Talmud seminary, which Berend Lehmann had founded. And that indeed I have been wandering through the old Jewish quarter of my hometown. It wasn't a ghetto, there was mixed living of Christians and Jews. But some of the streets were 80% Jewish. The idea that around the year 1700, 1/10 of the citizens of my hometown had been Jews, living in a parallel society with their own religion, their own customs and languages, fascinated me. However, the initial information I got about Safra Ben Yehuda Halevi was largely legend and contradictory on top of that. I wanted genuine information, consequently dived into the archives and found plenty of material. This started about 10 years, more than 10 years ago, and these books have come of it. This one, Privilegiert in engen Grenzen, deals with Berend Lehmann, especially the others are occurrences around Berend Lehmann. This book, Privilegiert in engen Grenzen, will be part of the present book, of the current book project, but changed and enhanced in several respects. Within 10 years, there are a lot of new facts coming to life that I have integrated into the new book, or will integrate into the new book. These books were self-published, books on demand, and they came to the attention of Schwabach. And in spite of my blatant lack of academic titles, he encouraged me to complete what was in the books so as to write the real biography of Lehmann. And now there is the manuscript going from him to me and back to be published by Dick Walter one of these days. We are discussing the final touch-up. The plan of it lies before you. Chapter 1 is about the starting point of my investigations, namely what was known about Berend Lehmann 15 years ago. Actually, there were 3 images of him. The first one, a novel published about 1870 by the Mainz rabbi Marcus Lehmann, who has nothing to do with Berend Lehmann, but was a Yeshiva student in Halberstadt, and wrote a 2-volume book about him in Lehmann's Jüdischer Volksbücherei. It was so popular in Halberstadt that Halberstadt Jews believed they knew Berend Lehmann from this novel, which was more fantasy out of the head of Marcus Lehmann. So this is this is the first image of him which I found, the popular image that was that was popular among the Halberstadt Jews. Their knowledge came from this book, whose Hebrew translation was re-edited even after the Second World War. That is its popularity. There was some hero, Berman, his Yiddish name, Berman Halberstadt. Berman, noble and rich. Berman the benevolent. Berman the influential, a model Yehudi, a saint. So much for the first image of Lehmann. Number 2 comes from representatives of the Wissenschaft des Judentums, the historiography of Judaism. Between 1850 and 1950, they taught the world some of the harder facts about Lehmann as a shrewd but not always successful businessman, and they showed him not quite so saintly in the greater context of his politics and economics, in the economics of his age. Mind you, this was very little. There has never been a biography of Lehmann, a complete biography. The peak of objectivity about Lehmann was reached in 1924 in an article by Joseph Meisel, the later founder of the wonderful archives next door. But this was only about 12 letters by Berend Lehmann, very little interpretation. But he was the first person to note that he had gone bankrupt. Bankruptcy did not occur in the popular image. And the latest of these Wissenschaft des Judentums researchers was this lady, Selma Stern. And there is a special thing about her. She's very important as far as Prussia and the Jews is concerned. What she wrote about Wolfenbüttel is much less substantial because she wrote it in the American emigration with no access to the sources, to the archive, to the German archives. The problem with her is that she was saved out of Germany in 1941. So in 1940, she had perhaps not seen, that was impossible, Jews were not allowed in cinemas, but she knew that this film had had a disastrous effect on people. And Diek's book, in which Lehmann had a chapter of 18 pages and was regarded as the typical Jewish Zuhrer, more or less a criminal. These two things she had in mind when she wrote her second large work about the court Jews. And she treated Berend Lehmann as der eigentliche Hofjude, the genuine court Jew, and this, of course, is methodologically very a problem, because you have to always keep that in mind when you read her book. Okay, this was image number 2, the Wissenschaft des Judentums. Image number 3 is already clear. It is practically what we have in that film and in the work by Dieck. But it was not only Dieck in 1938 who looked upon Berend Lehmann and all Jews generally from an anti-Semite point of view, from the point of view of an anti-Semite. Of course, he did not call his series of books published between 1953 and 1960 Hof Juden. He called them Hof Finanz. Heaven forbid, in Adenauer's clean post-war Germany, Juden were not mentioned, not easily mentioned. And well, he was convinced that Jews had a natural affinity with money in their veins, sort of. And this was, of course, a more terrible relapse methodologically and ideologically against Wissenschaft des Judentums, especially, I forgot to mention Max Freudenthal, the Nuremberg supreme rabbi. Okay, so here we have more or less openly, again, a man handling enormous sums of money, always with the undertone of being a usurer and tempting Augustus the Strong with ever new things to buy. And okay, we'll talk about Berend Lehmann and Augustus the Strong later on. Okay, so much for a very short version of the 3 images extant right into the 1990s. You see, the history of one prominent Jew's biography takes us into the middle of all the German and Jewish dilemma of the past couple of centuries. In 2002, there appeared this collection of reports held at the Halberstadt Moses Mendelssohn Academy, the former yeshiva, and in it there is a wonderful article by Lucia Rasper, Frankfurt Judaist, about Berend Lehmann, a few pages, but an enormous lot of material, and for the first time after Meisel, really unbiased. And that was more or less where I could start. The younger historians, that was my impression, were not so keen on Berend Lehmann because there was too much material in the archives. And my advantage in retirement was, I had the time to go down. My book contains a modified portrait of Lehmann, in some respects strongly modified, and I will give you a rough sketch of the new image beforehand, and you have it, the last 3 paragraphs on your handout. This is methodologically not very good either, but it means I can shorten things when I see that my time is running out. So the result at the beginning. Lehmann the rich, yes, rich at times, courageous, risk-taking, not that noble, much more a defender than an enjoyer of his money, at a loss for it in the end. Lehmann the Benevolent, yes, there remain the Talmud, the Yeshiva, the temple, 3 mitzvot, complemented by service for the Halberstadt guerrilla as Panas and as Stadtland for the Brandenburg Prussian and possibly also for the Polish Jewry. About the Polish Jewry I couldn't make sure, although I had a young Polish lady who helped me find out. We couldn't find out. So a very dark problem, the lack of communication between Polish and, for instance, German or English writing scholars. Well, benevolent, yes. Lehmann the influential, his factual influence with the Christian princes was far weaker than formerly suggested. There was in the popular image always Joseph guiding the Pharaoh, looming large in the background. So Marcus Lehmann said he could have been, or he has, of the ministers of Augustus the Strong saying, if he were not a Jew, he would have to be our foreign minister. This is a long way from the facts. Far from a minister to any prince, but on the other hand, his political ambition as a person was much stronger than the suggested influence. He attempted more than Marcus Lehmann thought had been the case. He attempted to move things, change the map of Europe, though overrating himself grotesquely. Off we go to see where the modified image shows in his thrilling life. Chapter 2 tells us where Lehmann came from. Born in 1661 in the city of Essen, his father belonging to a clan of tradespeople and moneylenders of medium importance. The earliest archival evidence shows Lehmann at the age of 25 to be a silver and mint agent traveling between his Westphalian home region, Berlin, and the Leipzig trade fairs. This, for instance, is something which is not in the village here to glance yet. Here we have his great master, Augustus the Strong, together with his contemporary Prussian king, Frederick William I, the father of Frederick the Great, who hated the flute playing of his son. Okay. At the Leipzig trade fairs, there must have been 2 connections that came about. One was with Augustus the Strong, who was young and ambitious, and who obviously bought jewels from him and took out loans, comparatively small loans, compared with what was to come later. A second connection, which Lehmann obviously met in Halberstadt, was his father-in-law, a very important person in the history of the Halberstadt community before Berend Lehmann. He married his daughter, and in that way very quickly became a prominent member of that community. chapter 3, the great time, the heyday of Lehmann started around 1695, when Elector Augustus stood with the German and Austrian emperor against the Turks in Hungary. The emperor had exhausted his means, and he offered the command of his troops to Augustus on condition that he should pay for the campaign. This is the way Weltpolitik, world politics were made in those days, and there was always money concerned. The Saxon Army Finance Commissioner, he was the person to see to the money. He suggested Berend Lehmann. He knew Berend Lehmann. And Berend Lehmann had the backing of a network of religionist businessmen, and he saw to an adequate loan. Lehmann had to borrow the money from the Viennese court Jew Samson Wertheimer, with whom he, strangely enough, had the credit which the Kaiser seemingly did not have anymore. After the campaign, Augustus